Hello and welcome to the channel and welcome to the next episode of Heretic Dave Top Tips, and this time I'm going to be talking about army lists, how to build an army list and things to think about while building an army list. So yeah, I've already done videos on terrain, how to set out the terrain for different deployment maps, so feel free to check that out if you want to know a good way of setting out your terrain, I guess, to make a good, fun and balanced game, which also can look nice. And I've also done a video on deployment and things to think about during deployment. So this time, army lists. In front of you, we see an Imperial Guard army list, or Astra Militarum. Is it the best Imperial Guard list around? No, probably not, but it should be pretty good. And I'm just going to use this as an example. However, the things I will be talking about and discussing are things that you should apply to every faction when creating an army list. So before we dive in to the things to consider, feel free to smash the like button if you like the content, hit subscribe. There'll be a battle report or something like this every single week. And if you want to support me and the channel further, you can become a YouTube channel member, which can get you early access to videos or access to the Discord. And I've also got links below for my Instagram and Element Games link and things like that. So yes, what things shall we consider while creating or building an army list to be competitive in 40k? Right, I've even jotted them down because there's quite a few things you have to think about. You probably can't read my terrible handwriting, but I can, so it's fine. Things to think about. Your army rule. So for example, with the guard, we have orders. So you want to make sure you've actually got some officers in your army, because otherwise you're not going to actually take any advantage of your army rule. So with Space Marines, you get the oath for moment, which is just a really easy army rule. You don't have to put anything into your list to base it around oath for moment. It's just reroll hits. But for some armies, the army rule is based around certain things. So with Guard, it's based around officers and orders. So make sure you've got some officers in your army to order your units. Otherwise, you're not using your army rule, so it's a bit of a waste. Detachment rules is another thing to think about. So for the Guard at the moment, obviously we've just got the index. All we've got is the lethal hits with ranged attacks while remaining stationary. So that's, you want to make sure you've got some long-ranged guns in the army that can remain stationary and benefit from that. So obviously you want some artillery or indirect fire to benefit from that. It being restricted to remain stationary isn't that great, because obviously 40k is a game of movement and movement wins games, but still the detachment rule really helps artillery, so make sure you're using some artillery. Another thing worth thinking about is stratagems. So depending on your detachment, let's say you've picked, Tyranid's Vanguard detachment, and its detachment rule is, you can fall back and charge with everything, and Vanguard units can advance and charge. And it's got loads of stratagems around Vanguard keyword Tyranids. Make sure you actually have Vanguard detachment, Vanguard keyword Tyranid units within your Vanguard detachment Tyranid list. Otherwise, it's a complete waste of time. Sure, you can not bother, but then you're not going to get the full benefit of the detachment rule and the stratagems. So make sure that you're putting units in your list which benefit from the detachment rule and its stratagems. Another example would be Deathwatch, for example. They've got the kill team tactics rule, which can give you lethal hits or sustained hits, and loads of the stratagems are based around kill teams and bolt gun weaponry. So if you really want to maximize Deathwatch, then you probably want volume to get those sixes for lethal and sustained hits, and then have lots of bolt weaponry, I guess, to benefit from the stratagems, or not. So yeah, think about the stratagems when you're building lists. If you've got a really cool stratagem that's really powerful with a certain type of unit, you probably want to include that unit in your list. So think about the detachment rule, think about your army rule, and think about the stratagems when you're putting units in your list and how you can get the most out of your rules. That's obviously different for different factions, but it's still something that you really need to think about. Other things that you need to think about are primary objectives and secondary objectives. How will your army actually score points to win you the game? Because 40k is a game about points. So primary objectives, you want units that can hold objectives or deny objectives. So, you probably want something on your home objective that can just sit there all game and hold it quite comfortably. So it might maybe be a big unit, or you might want it to be a tough unit, or maybe you might think, I'll just put a cheap unit there because, they should be perfectly fine if they're hidden behind a wall, Although if you do that and come across indirect fire, you might have a problem. And as for other primary objectives that aren't the one in your deployment zone, you probably want really tough units to go and hold an objective, or you might go with like a horde unit with lots of high OC models to hold objectives that way. And obviously there's the denying of objectives as well, and trading on and off objectives with cheap disposable units with good OC, such as a unit of guardsmen, which you can just throw onto an objective in your turn, and deny the opponent's points in their turn, but they'll probably die, so you're not going to get the points on the objective of your turn either, but they've kind of done their job for their points. So there's lots of things to think about with regards to primary objectives. So there's that, and then secondary objectives, most of them are around being in the right place at the right time and doing something, essentially. So you want mobility and board control in your list, which is another point I'll get to later. But you do need to think about secondary objectives when making a list. Have you got something in your list that can get you that behind enemy lines? Have you got something in your list that can assassinate? Or have you got something in your list that can investigate signals, or whatever it might be? You've got to think, right, I've got units in my list that can just move about the board quickly, doing things, scoring points, and that's their job. They don't necessarily need to kill things, they just need to be in the list to score me some points. And that sort of moves on to my next point, which is purpose. Every unit in this list I have in front of me has its own purpose and role within the army. If you're just throwing units into your army list because the internet says they're good, okay, that's fine. They probably are a good unit and they probably will deal damage, or they might be really resilient, or whatever it might be that they're good at. But are you actually thinking about what their role is going to be within your army list? So for example, Rogal Dawns are really good. Let's put 3 Rogal Dawns in your list. I mean, you can, and it's going to be a problem for certain people, but that's also a lot of points put into 3 models. So you do need to think about what a unit's role is in the list. Is it there to hold primary? Is it there to deny primary? Is it there to score secondary? Is it there to deal damage? Is it there to be a nuisance? Is it there as a trading unit? Is it there to deep strike in and get me some secondaries? Is it there to, I don't know, whatever it might be, help me with board control? Is it there to buff my other units? Is it there to, nerf the enemy units? So what is the actual purpose of the units that you're putting in? Another thing that you need to think about, which kind of goes with the whole objective-y thing, is thinking about movement and board control. I've said it before, I've said it many times, lots of people have said it many times, movement does win games. You need to have some quick units in your army, either by having good movement, or deep strike, or scout, or infiltrate, or maybe have a bit of all of them. So you can get a bit of board control, get around the board, get to where you need to be to score you the points. Movement is absolutely vital. If you're a really, really slow army, and you've got no scout, or no infiltrate, or no deep strike, and all you're doing is walking really slowly up the board, it's probably going to take you a few turns before you get around to scoring some points. So there are things that you need to think about. And another thing that needs to be thought about is, I've touched on it a little bit there, scouting and infiltrating units. I love scouting and infiltrating units. They're absolutely priceless. The fact that you can put a scout unit inside a transport and that transport gets scout is amazing. Having transports with pre-game moves is sort of, or start of battle moves is really, really fun and very useful. And infiltrate is very, very powerful as well. Able to put something where it needs to be before you even roll a dice is also very, very good. And they kind of go hand in hand. If you've got lots of scouting units, like I have in this list, I'll go through my list in a minute and go through all these points for this list. But if you have lots of scouting units and you haven't got any infiltrating units, your scout moves can be easily countered. How does someone counter a scout move? Well, quite simply, if you're playing a competitive game or even a casual game, you could go, do you have any scout units? They might go, yeah, this unit, that unit, that unit. And then you've got some infiltrating units and you think, oh, great. And they haven't got any infiltrating units, for example, to go with their scout units. You can essentially, if you've got a cheap infiltrating unit, such as rattling snipers, or literally a unit of eliminators if you're Space Marines or whatever. They're quite cheap for an infiltrating unit. What you can do is you can deploy. Deployment is very key. Watch my deployment video to find out more. You can deploy infiltrators and spread them out. It's only a unit of 5. You can spread them out directly in front of your opponent's scout units. Then when they come to do their scout moves, they can't move forwards. They just don't get a scout move. Because you can only scout move if you end that scout move more than 9 inches away from your enemy's deployment zone or their enemy units. If they've put an infiltrating unit and it's cheap and throwaway, absolutely fine, just like random snipers or eliminators or something else, and they strung it out across the middle of the board, literally just over 9 inches away from your deployment zone in front of your scout units are not moving forwards. They may move sideways, they may move backwards, but they're certainly not moving forwards. So if you've got scout units, make sure you've always got at least one infiltrator unit, so you can essentially put your infiltrator unit in front of your scouting units to guarantee that the enemy won't be able to infiltrate in your way, basically. So that's something to think about. Not everyone thinks about those sorts of things, but yeah, you can counter deploy if someone's got scout units and no infiltrate units. So that's something to think about for infiltrating and scout moving. And the sort of the final bullet point really is, what units deal damage? Have you got enough anti-tank? Do you have enough anti-infantry? Which way do you want to skew? Do you want to skew into more anti-tank? Do you want to skew into more anti-infantry? And then your army itself. Are you going to have lots of armour, or are you going to have lots of infantry? Or are you going to have a bit of both? So you've got to think about damage. Do you have units in your army that will deal damage to the enemy consistently and reliably? If the answer to that is no, you might have a problem. If the answer is yes, every unit in the army will deal damage to the army consistently and reliably, then that's great, although it probably means you've sacrificed points and not had any units in your army to get you those secondary objectives or to run around doing things. So there is a balance to it. Another thing to think about, although I didn't write it down, but I've just suddenly thought of this because of what I've actually got in my list here. Obviously in my list here I've got Lord Solar, not Lord Solar. And what is special about Lord Solar? Well, there's lots of things. I mean, he's called Lord Solar and he rides a horse, but my guy rides a motorbike because we're Catachan and horses are a bit poncy. But in terms of rules, he gives us a CP at the start of every turn. Very useful, very handy. If you've got ways of getting CP in your turn, it's very good now because obviously you don't start a bucket load of CP anymore. You only get 1 at the start of each turn. You can get some for discarding secondary objectives, but obviously the plan is to score your secondary objectives, so sometimes you don't always get an extra CP in your turn. So if you've got a way of having a CP farm such as Lord Solar or Azrael for Dark Angels, or who else gives you CP? Abaddon can give you CPs. If you've got, or Swarmlord, if you've got something that can give you a CP, take it. If you also have something that's got abilities to nerf opponent stratagems, that's quite powerful as well. So those things are quite useful. But what's also very special about Lord Solar is that he does a redeploy after deployment. It's before we know who's going first and second, I believe, based on how it's worded. But it is a redeploy. So what you can do, for example, is you can put your cheap infiltrating unit. You can infiltrate them in the middle of the board, so then the enemy can't infiltrate in the middle of the board and get in the way of your scout moves, and then simply after everyone's deployed, you can simply redeploy them and infiltrate them somewhere else, which is really quite powerful. Or if the opponent's got infiltrators and they deployed before you, and they put something down the middle, and you can think, then you can redeploy things after deployment, which is very, very useful. So that's very handy. Anyway, I will run through my list very quickly and then sort of go through why each thing is in the list, basically. So this will be more of a guard-specific thing. But again, the things we're looking at in lists apply to every faction and every style of list. Speaking of styles, put units in your list and make your list suit your play style. If you like an army that likes to shoot, put guns in it. If you like an army that's very quick, put quick things in it. If you like an army that wants to get stuck in a combat, put things in like to get stuck in combat. don't just go, oh, that list is really good on the internet of all these guns. Let's put that in my list. And you're not someone who likes sitting back shooting things or isn't familiar with that tactic, then it probably won't suit you and work very well. So style of play is important as well. But anyway, right. So my list, what have I got? I've got Lord Solar. As mentioned, he's got the CP farm and the redeploy, which is really nice. And he can also give out free orders to any unit. Not just, regiment or just squadron, literally any unit. So you can even order Borgrins, Ratlins, Baneblades, you name it, you can order it. So he's very, very good. He can put out free orders. However, orders range is only 6 inches. So how do you get the benefit of him? Well, you put him in a big infantry squad with a command squad that has a Master Vox, because then every officer in that unit can issue orders up to 24 inches. So now I've suddenly got Lord Solar kicking out free orders from 24 inches away. Very, very nice. So that's why he's in the list, to buff whatever he feels like, basically, as well as give me a CP and redeploy shenanigans from my infiltrate and scout units. Very handy. Redeploy is also very good. You can almost bait people. You can put a big scary tank somewhere and go, ha, there you go. And then because they're worried about that big tank somewhere, they're going to probably hide from it. Or maybe they're not. Maybe they're going to put another big scary tank opposite your big scary tank. And then you can just redeploy and go, oh, I've hidden it now. And their tank's in the open. Or maybe they didn't. If they hid from it, then great, you've hidden from absolutely nothing and you've given up board control. So you can do lots of shenanigans with redeploys. But anyway, so that's why he's in the list. He's a really good unit to have in your guard list. Also include, in my opinion, I'm glad I bothered getting the bits to make a proxy one. And yes, he will be joined by a 20-man infantry squad with 2 mortars, 2 plasma guns, 2 Volkscasters and 2 bolt guns. Infantry squads get benefit of cover when they're on an objective. Very, very nice. And the whole idea of this big unit here is to sit on my home objective. They are my home objective sitting unit. And then joining that as well will also be a command squad with a commander, another mortar, a medic, and a Master Volkscaster, as mentioned. So essentially I've got a platoon commander and Lord Solar kicking out 4 orders between them, 24 inches. He can only order regiment units, but he can order whatever he feels like. And the entire 20 model blob, whatever it is, will have a 6-up, feel no pain, and the benefit of cover when on an objective. So a very good unit to have sitting on your home objective, out of line of sight, with 3 mortars plonking away, going thump, 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 and also kicking out orders. So they're not just units sitting on the home objective doing absolutely nothing, they're also doing a little bit of damage, holding it quite comfortably, and also putting out buffs for the rest of the army. I did try running it with just a 10-man unit, the command squad and Lord Solar, but if someone does have indirect fire, then that's very easy to kill. A 20-man unit with a command squad and Lord Solar is a lot more difficult to kill. Even if the enemy has quite a bit of indirect fire, they'll probably have to put quite a lot into them to kill them. So that's the reason why I've gone for a bigger blob. If you're going to have a blob, make it a big blob. Another good thing about having 3 mortars sitting at the back is, well, you have the ability to knock other people's chaff units off of their home objectives. If someone's got a unit of cultists sitting on their home objective, or a unit of poxwalkers, or a unit of, even a unit of intercessors, 3 mortars turn after turn after turn will start to do some damage. Or some Eldar Guardians, or whatever it might be. You can threaten whatever cheap units on your opponent's home objective with those mortars. D6 shots each, plus blast, tell them to take aim. They'll be getting lethal hits on 6s because they'll be remaining stationary. So, yeah, they can do a little bit of damage. That's not what they're there for, though. It also means that I can basically target any enemy unit on the board for the stratagem fields of fire, which then gives my other regiment and squadron units extra AP against that unit. So I can just pick a unit and go, I want extra AP on that, throw some mortars at it, and then play the stratagem. But anyway, so that's my unit that's going to sit on the home objective. Every army list you make, you'll want a unit that can sit on your home objective. If it's going to be a fragile unit, you probably want to make sure it's got sticky objectives, like intercessors or chaos cultists, so that if it does get blown off the home objective, you're still going to hold the objective. Or you make it a more durable unit, such as heavy intercessors, where you think, okay, if someone wants to put indirect fire into these guys like a Manticore or Basilisk, it's going to take a bit of killing to get rid of them, sort of thing. Or you put units on your home objective that can actually have indirect fire and just sit there on your home objective and also still deal damage. You could just park a Basilisk on a home objective and go, there you go. That will get the job done and do some damage. But anyway, so home objective unit is sitting right there. So that's my primary objective sort of unit done. My other primary objective units that I've got in my list are the Borgrens. They're only OC1 each, but they're as tough as nails, these lads. They're 3 wounds with toughness 6, -1 damage, and a 6-up feeling of pain, and a 4+ invulnerable save. They've only got a 4-up save normally, but the toughness 6 and -1 damage, feeling of pain, and the 4-up involved more than makes up for it. Someone's going to have to put some serious firepower into this unit to kill it. That's my run into the middle and club things to death unit. Do a bit of damage, but their main job is to sit there and not die, and hopefully score me some primary objectives. Other primary units are, of course, the infantry I've got here. So I've got 3 units of catch and jungle fighters. 2 of them are in chimeras. One of them is not. This unit is essentially a cheap scout unit I can run forwards early game, which will then be followed up by the Borgrens. If you get Ares and Isle turn 1, or deploy Teleport Home turn 1, or Secure No Man's Land turn 1, or something like that, I'll just, they'll scout move 6, then they can move another 6, advance if I need them to, move them if I really need to. First turn they can be very, very quick to get me some board control and get me some secondaries. Yes, they'll die immediately after that, but it's fine. I've only wasted 55 points to score some victory points. So that's that unit's job. The other units of catch hands in the Chimera's job is to hold objectives, move around, and also to trade as well. So as mentioned earlier, if you put scout units in a transport, as long as every model that's in that transport has the scout ability, that transport gains the scout ability. So these chimeras get a 6-inch pre-game move, then they can move 10 inches. I can move them, I can advance them. They're quite quick little units. And, in each chimera, I've got 20 OC sitting in it, ready to jump out and deny an objective or hold an objective. So is that better than having a 20-man blob and a 20-man blob? In my opinion, yes. It's easier to hide a transport than it is to hide 20 men. It's also a lot more difficult to kill a transport than it is to kill 20 guardsmen. So that's the point there. And, I can drive the transport onto an objective, hold it. Then the enemy might come over and go and charge the transport, maybe, and try and take the objective off of me. But if they then kill the transport, then my 10 guys get out with 20 OC between them, and I'm still holding the objective come my turn. So they're primary objective holders, which also give me board control, and just good point scoring units, I find. Also quite good at trading as well. I can disembark the catchans, run them onto another objective and deny it, and the Chimera can still sit on my objective holding it. So yeah, that is useful. Board control, primary objectives, that's what they're there to do. So that's that section. I mentioned my Ratlins earlier. It's always good to have an infiltrating unit in your list. Same as it's always good to have trading units in your list, and units that can move onto primary objectives quickly and hold them. You don't want to have no primary objectives in your turn 2 apart from your home one. You want to get to at least one other primary objective in your first movement phase. Those chimeras can do it. Infiltrators can also do that job for you. And as mentioned, they're cheap. They're disposable. They can move, shoot, move, which is really fun. And they're very annoying. And having infiltrators along with scout units works really, really nicely, as I mentioned earlier. Other scouting units, I've got Scout Sentinels. Why are they in the list? Well, more board control, more movement, more speed to get around the board, scoring those points. And also, they actually buff the rest of my army as well, because each of them can point at an enemy unit. Then everything else in my army gets the real hit rolls of 1 against it when shooting. And also, indirect fire things don't suffer the penalty for indirect fire. So, not only are they buffing units, they're also fairly durable as well. Toughness 7, 7 wounds, 3-up save. They're as durable as 10 infantry. So you think for a Guardist, I haven't got much infantry. I've got 20, 10. But, Borgrens, 6 Borgren is a lot more resilient than 20 Guardsmen, in my opinion. 10 Guardsmen in a Chimera is more resilient than 20 Guardsmen, in my opinion. That's a throwaway unit. That's absolutely fine. And a Scout Sentinel is just as resilient as 10 Guardsmen as well. Because with this amount of tanks on the board, who wants to put dedicated anti-tank into a Scout Sentinel? No one. So they're probably going to shoot small arms into them, in which case they're a lot more durable than 10 Guardsmen. And if they do want to shoot anti-tank into the Sentinels, then they're not shooting the tanks with it. so it's fine. But no, so they're there to buff the army and give me scout moves, board control, early board control. And also, they're very good harassing units. They get a scout move, they're quite quick after that. They're quite resilient. They can charge something and just tie it up for a turn, maybe. They're very, very good units, Sentinels. Very, very good units. So I've got lots of scouting and board control here, which can also help with primary objectives and also secondaries. The Chimeras are really quick to get about, to get to the corners to investigate a signal, or get onto those no man's land objectives, or deploy a teleport homer, move up and then chuck a unit out to deploy a teleport homer or something. So they're my point scoring units, essentially, what I've gone through so far. Point scoring and board control units. I've got 2 more point scoring units though. 2 units of Scions. Cheap units which can deep strike. Absolutely priceless in my opinion. Not every faction can get cheap deep striking units. Fair enough. But I think you should always try and have something that can deep strike in your list if you can, whether it be a Tyranid Ripper Swarm, or a unit of Terminators, or a unit of Assault Marines, or I don't know, whatever it might be. You want something that can deep strike, or a Calidius Assassin, which can sort of, jump off the board, jump back on the board, jump back off the board, jump back on the board. You want something that can get behind the enemy lines, essentially, in your list, to score those kind of secondaries, like behind enemy lines, like engaging all fronts, like to board teleport hammer, like investigate signals. And you want at least 2. 3 is probably the max you want to go with these sort of units. 2 is, I think, a good number. If you've only got 1 and you get behind enemy lines, you're not getting all the points. If you get investigate signals, then you've probably got the corner in your home objective, one that's near, and then if you drop something in, you're probably going to get 1, but you want 2 so you can drop in each of the corners if possible. So 2 cheap deep striking units just to drop in for secondaries. If they die after that, it's fine. Calidius Assassins, as I mentioned, also very good at that. If you're an Imperium player. Guard players also use Cyclops demolition vehicles and commissars and things just to sort of bring on from reserves and help you with those secondaries, which is fine. Except for with strategic reserves, you can't come in the opponent's deployment zone in turn 2. I can deep strike in deployment zone in turn 2 with Scions. Thank you very much, I'll have Scions. And then, another thing to think about with deep strikey type units is if you've got something in your index or codex, whatever it might be, that has an ability to deep strike close to the 9 inches, like let's say within 3 inches, very, very powerful. If you can deep strike that close, it's almost impossible to screen out. So if you get those secondaries, guaranteed to get them pretty much. Unless it's countered by units such as, Space Marine Infiltrators, which can deny all deep striking or strategic reserving within 12 inches of them. So again, if you've got something like that you can put in your list, very, very powerful to deny those sorts of units in people's lists. So that's a bit about deep striking units. And then you get onto the damage dealers and the buffing units. So we've had some buffing here from the Orders and the Sentinels. Another sort of buffing unit that you might like if you've got lots of vehicles, for example, would be something like a Tech Priest or a Tech Marine or a Warp Smith or something, or just a character which can buff other things in your army, or not necessarily a character, a unit which can help the rest of your army. So in this list here, I've gone with a Tech Priest because he's cheap and I've got lots of tanks. Makes sense. He can give one an invulnerable save and a healer tank, D3 wounds each turn as well. Very nice, very cheap. I'll have him. Thank you very much. So that's him. And then essentially, I've got the damage dealing section. So damage dealers, I spoke earlier about making sure you've got enough anti-infantry and anti-tank in your lists to sort of cope with most lists. With all the flashlights I've got going on, and the sniper rifles and the hotshot lads and the mauls and the flamers and the chimeras, I think I've got enough anti-infantry. Not elite infantry, but your average infantry. I've got enough of that. I need some anti-tank. I think it's fair to say. Here's some anti-tank. Some tanks. So I've got a tank commander here. So not only is he going to deal damage, he's actually going to order a couple of tanks because I've given it an enhancement to do 2 orders. So he can make 2 other tanks perform better, basically. And then he's got a demolish cannon and las cannon, 2 multi-miles, and 100 killer missile. He is an anti-tank machine. If the enemy has something big, he is the nut to crack that nut. So that's his job in the list, is just to go around killing stuff, basically. And then next to him, I've got a tank which can have a similar role, but also, rather than ordering things, it's got a really cool ability. Basically, anything that I shoot the exterminator with its turret weapon, I can pick one target, and everything else in the army gets an extra AP against it. So, similar to the Sentinels, he sort of has two roles. He can buff the rest of my army and do something else. They buff the rest of my army and help me with board control. He buffs the rest of my army and can also deal some damage. So that's the Lemurus Exterminator. He's also got las cannons, multi-mels, anti-clear missile. You know, he can deal damage. And then I've got two more. I've got two standard battle tanks, which only job is to kill things off of objectives. Because if they're targeting something on an objective, they will reroll all their hit rolls, which is just absolutely glorious. They've got battle cannons, las cannons, heavy bolters, anti-killer missile, so lots of volume, with a bit of anti-tank added in, and yes, very, very nice. The thing with battle tanks, though, it's more of a guard-specific thing. But the thing is about battle tanks, if you've got normal battle tanks with battle cannons, they're only AP 1. So if you bring in battle tanks, bring an exterminator, at least one, so then your battle cannons can go up in AP. And combine that with fields of fire from the mortars, for example, you can get battle cannons up to AP 3 free damage. Very, very nice. If you're not bringing battle cannons, you don't have to worry so much about exterminators or fields of fire. But if you bring in the battle tanks, you want as much AP on to help them as possible. So they're my damage dealers. They're also very durable, so I can drive them onto objectives and they'll be fine. I've also got a basilisk, which can deal a bit of damage. It's sort of anti-infantry damage, but it's got indirect fire, which, as mentioned earlier, is very, very nice for killing things off of enemy home objectives and things. But again, he's got like a dual role. Not only will he deal damage, he will also slow the enemy down. If that extra cannon hits an infantry unit, it will get its movements, advances, and charge rolls all reduced by 2. So yes, a very good unit to have in your list. Not only for a bit of indirect fire damage, but also to slow the enemy down. And as mentioned earlier, movement wins games. So that's my list, my example list, let's say. And as you can, sort of hear from what I've said, every unit here is here for a reason. I haven't just thrown a unit in a list and gone, that'll do, that's cool, let's put that in the list. That's fine to do for a casual game or a narrative game, but if you're thinking of getting the most out of your army and you're playing a competitive game with a friend or maybe going to a tournament, you really need to think, why is this unit in my list? What is it doing for me that I need it for? Whether it be extra CP and redeployment or on orders, whether it be being tough, whether it be infiltrating to help you scout units, whether it be scouting to help with board control and trading on objectives, whether it be to deal damage. Everything here is here for a reason. So when you're building your list, as mentioned, everything needs to have a purpose. You need units that will score you primary and secondary points, and also deny your enemy primary and secondary points where possible. You need to think about units that will benefit from your army rule and detachment rule and your stratagems, and also thinking about board control. Board control is so vital. Nearly every list I make now has scout units and infiltrating units in it because it's so key to getting around the board early, turn 1, turn 2, and scoring those points. If you've got a really slow army, let's say it's the corner deployment zone, if you're all really slow, it's going to take you a while to get to where you want to be. You can sort of be stuck in the corner for a turn or two. It's too late. It's too late. You need to infiltrate over there, or scout move and move over there. So you're over there and over here, and then you can start sweeping your way across. Or maybe you can infiltrate there and there, and then the enemy's stuck in the corner. Board control is so key now. With controlling those primary objectives, getting those secondary objectives. Board control and movement is absolutely vital. Make sure you include some infiltrate units and scout units in your list, as well as quick units to back them up. Unit to sit on your objective, something tough to sit in the middle objective, something to deal damage, bit of indirect fire if you can afford it, in terms of points. Some indirect fire units are very costly at the moment. And make sure you've got something that can deep strike and do shenanigans. And cheap trading units, also very, very useful. But yes, I hope this video was useful. And sort of not just helped with guard players, but hopefully helped with other people who are thinking about how to build and optimize a list, and the things that you need to think about I've gone through. So hopefully when you're building your list, you'll think about those things and go, okay, right, what is this unit doing in my list? Is it getting me secondaries? Is it getting me primaries? Is it helping me with board control? Is it annoying the opponent? Is it there to deal damage? What is its purpose? Why is it in that list? If you can't think of a reason, get it out of your list. Basically. Or another thing to think about, obviously, is if you've put a unit in your list and it has a purpose, I've got, for example, a 10-man unit, 10-man unit of Catachans here to scout with and get into the mid-board early game to help with primary and secondary. Is there something I could have on my list that could do the same thing for less points? That's another way to optimize. This unit is fulfilling this purpose in my list. Is there another unit I can have that can do exactly the same thing and fulfill the exact same purpose for less points? Like with the Scions, for example. I could have a Cladius Assassin to deep strike in and jump around and do things, but she is basically almost twice as much points as a unit of 5 Scions. So, okay, she's very good. I'm not denying that. She can come off. Whereas Scions just drop down once and they're done. But you're having to pay almost twice as many points for it. Whereas you could just go, I'll have a second unit of Scions. So, I'm not saying 2 Scions is better than a Cladius Assassin. Probably what you really want is a unit of Scions and a Cladius Assassin. But obviously you need points for it in your list. With the Chimeras, for example, I could have a Taurox instead. They're 5 points cheaper. Would that fulfill the same purpose? Yeah, to a point. The Taurox doesn't have a firing deck and doesn't have as many guns on it, so it's not as killy. It's also not as durable, but it's quicker, so it would help with the board control aspect. So, what do you want the Chimera doing? Do you want it dealing damage, or do you want it just being quick and helping with board control? If so, maybe put in a Taurox. I prefer the Chimeras because they're a bit more resilient and they've got extra gun, which is nice. So, but Tauroxes are also very, very good. Indirect fire, for example. Let's talk about Space Marines for a minute. You might think, I really want some indirect fire on my list, but it's all really expensive right now. Space Marines, you've basically got 2 options. You've got a Whirlwind, or you've got a unit of Desolation Marines. Desolation Marines are 20 points more. They're arguably more killy than a Whirlwind. Yeah, they are. But they're also a lot more fragile, so that kind of balances out. And then you think, well, hang on, they're 20 points more than a Whirlwind, so I'll just have a Whirlwind because it's doing the same purpose for 20 points less. Think about what a unit's purpose is and can you get that as cheaply as possible from another unit. That's something you need to think about. Let's say maybe you've got some intercessors in your Space Marine list. You've got a unit of 5 intercessors, great. Or maybe you've got 2 units of 5 intercessors. They've got assault weapons, they can run around, they can do actions, they can also hold objectives, they give you sticky objectives, fantastic. But if you get 10 tactical Marines, you're saving points, and then they can combat squad into 2 5-man units. You can still have 2 5-man units of Space Marines, but for less points. You could part 5 on your home objective, another 5 can run off somewhere. So you can get the same for less points. Slightly different role. They're not as quick as and mobile as intercessors, maybe. And they don't have sticky objectives. But if all the intercessors were going to do anyway was sit on your home objective, you can get another unit to do the same thing for less points. So not only do you need to think about the purpose of your units, how they interact with your army rules and detachment rules, how they interact with your stratagems, how they score primary and secondary points. Do they deal damage? Do they scout or infiltrate? Do they help you with movement and board control? Do they have extra buffs to your army, like CP farms, redeployments, extra AP, helping your vehicles, and can you get a similar unit for less points? If you can, do it. But they're all things to think about when building an army list. So, yes. Hope that's been helpful. If you like these top tips videos, then hopefully you'll like the next ones. The next ones are going to be about movement, the movement phase. I'll start going through all the different phases of these top tips videos now. I think movement, shooting, charging, and fighting, because they're also quite important. I might even do one on the command phase. Who knows? It'll probably be a short video, but hey ho, if people want to know about the command phase, I can talk about the command phase. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you in the next one.